My name is Terry Jones, and I'm on the government team at Highland Software. But before I came to Highland, I worked at the Arizona Department of Housing, and I was an OnBase customer. So I usually try to use examples from real government in the conversation, some of which are funny, and some of which will just shake your head because you've heard it before, and you've been there and you've done that. So I was asked today to talk about case management and really kind of how that meets data and documents together. In some ways, this is an old topic for Highland, and in other ways, not so much. Because in 2003, when I looked at OnBase myself to buy, there was a product called WorkView, but it was just coming out. And I knew that I wanted to go there someday for some reasons that I will explain to you. But with the next release, OnBase 12, it's really sort of hit its stride. And I think that's important for government because we don't always get rewarded for being at the bleeding edge of technology, even though I do think that we embrace a lot of things pretty quickly, and sometimes the private sector can't keep up with us. So I was excited to do this today because as we talk, you'll see my point about why I think it's really kind of important for government. So the first thing I wanted to do is to talk about what case management is. Then I wanted to talk about why it matters for government, because really there's 100 beautiful, nice, fun technologies out there, but we have to be careful in government because we have to explain ourselves because everybody pays taxes, including ourselves. And we want to buy software that works. We don't just want a trendy thing. We want something that works. And so I want to talk about why it matters for government, and then specifically how what OnBase is doing can fit into this. So first we'll talk about the definition of case management, which makes me giggle a little bit, and you'll see in a moment. Then why I think it has some relevance for us, and then why I think you might want to look at OnBase for that. So let's start. I love to use analysts because analysts spend their days analyzing, which I think is code for not doing the work that we all have to do every day. But in this particular case, one of the reasons why we're here today talking is because all the analysts are talking about case management. And AIM, which you probably know is a large national group that's been devoted to imaging for years and years and years, it has a definition for you. You know, a project or a transaction, it's open over time, it got closed at some other point, probably because there's a resolution of a problem or a claim or a request or all that kind of stuff. And they call it a complex activity. Now, I was going to put in there, also known as government, but I didn't. The analysts are talking about case management, and they've put this definition around stuff that we do every day in government. And then we had this further piece. It's likely to involve multiple persons in and outside of an organization with varying relationships to each other. And I kind of thought that meant that maybe we don't always speak to each other. As well as multiple documents and messages, which, of course, I had multiple bosses, so we know where multiple messages comes from. Then there's another analyst that's called Gartner. You may be familiar with them. They have a lot of government customers. And they broke it down in slightly a different way. So they're talking about cases being a bunch of events. And they're talking about medium to high levels of human involvement. I think the best example in government may be health and human services case management. There's a lot of human involvement in that if we're doing the program well. The process isn't linear, which of course may be the definition of government. And it's unstructured, even though we try to make things organized. Sometimes it's unstructured. There's a collaboration element, which means that more than one person may be needed to take care of something, or you have to consult with other people to take care of things or to solve the problem. Gartner comes right out and says you need an electronic case file for case management. This is absolutely something you need. That you need workflow and process management. That you have reporting and dashboards. That you have analytics and you have predictive modeling. The last three especially, I think, have a lot of interest from the private sector because there's a number of people who spend their days doing managing. And what they struggle with is, as we get more and more technologies, we have so many places to look for information that now we need to wrap something else around it to explain all the information to us, or as we like to call it, a dashboard. But I do know that a lot of us have databases out there, and our number one problem is, why can't I get any reports out of it? I put all the data in, but I can never get it out in the way that I need it. I might be able to get it out in the way that the funder who supported the purchase of the database wants it, But if I just wanted to know how many people I have to serve, can I get that out? Sometimes not so easily. So as you look at the analyst definitions, I think that these are helpful, and I wanted to put them here because you may hear about it or read about it. But let's talk a little bit more about what case management really is. So in my mind, when you think about case management, we have a set of people, and they do human-centric things. I'll get back to that. We have a set of systems we've bought. These are usually the databases or the solutions. And we have a number of folks in the room, from courts to human services to housing to accounting. It's okay, come on in. And we've bought a number of systems to handle that very specific data. And then you'll notice the symbol of OnBase for application enabler, because a lot of times you've connected that system to the documents. And that's this part right here, which is you have document-centric content. And I think what they're trying to say with the case management software definition is that we need a new way of looking at all these pieces of the puzzle that we use to do our government work. And we're going to call this case management. All right, so whether we have all those other things you saw in the earlier slides is not the point. The point is, to get things done in government, we do case management every day. And we do that by using people to do human-centric tasks. We have a number of systems we've invested in, and we have a bunch of documents or content that we have to manage to make decisions within the programs and activities that we do. And that's all case management. So you're all case managers. You just didn't know. So, all right. So one of the things that I want to do before we talk about how OnBase can help is to kind of break it down in a framework that I think will look more familiar to you and be more meaningful than the analyst definition. So in their mind, the case consists of 5 sort of parts, which we have here. We have work to do. We have tasks that have dates and times and due dates. That's what diaries means. We have a file, which, depending on what kind of job you do, is anything from the documentation to prove you did what you were supposed to do, to the applications, to the filings in a case, to the evidence. So we've got that file there, and traditionally our OnBase work has really sat right there. What do we do about the file? There's all that paper. Then we have notes. So the thing about notes is, of course, we have Post-it notes in OnBase. But in our next generation, we became more collaborative. We'll get back to that. And then we have activities. And that's really where the workflow sits, right? Because there's things we're supposed to do. There's routing that's supposed to happen. And when you look at case management this way, you can see a lot of places where OnBase probably helped you out. You've got workflow. You've got Post-it notes and collaboration. You've got all that document piece. Maybe you integrated your OnBase to Outlook. And you've got tasks, and that's kind of sitting in the workflow too, or it could be. So this really isn't that odd of a structure. I just think that we didn't often think of ourselves as case managers. So if you look at this, it's more fully blown out, and I kind of did this so that if you want to share this presentation with anybody, you've got this really sort of organized. But let's talk about it a little bit. So if you have work to be completed, and some of it is manual and some of it is automated, you need reminders. Sometimes the caseworker is setting these reminders to pace their own work. So one of us who, if I get something in my inbox and I need to set up a follow-up type operation, I usually set that myself. We know very much about the file. We've got all the documents related, and hopefully they're sitting in OnBase. We've got recorded thoughts and collaborations, and it could be recorded by a group of people. I think this is an important set of squares to think about for a second, because it isn't uncommon for multiple folks to be dealing with the same customer who approaches government. So think about it for a second. Have you ever sort of wondered what your colleague did to help someone who's now calling you? Never happens, right? And I think that that's why the collaboration piece is something to reflect upon. We're going to talk about it again. Okay, and then you obviously have decisions made and actions taken and a sort of a history of the case. Now, if you think of these two side by side, did anyone ever call you and say, but I told so-and-so this story yesterday, why don't you know that? Because to our customers, we're just government with a G. We're not this cubicle, that building, this department. We're just government that I pay too much tax dollars to, maybe. Maybe they love you, maybe they don't. So one of the things that I think is really advantageous about the case management approach is the ability to group these things together to create a better constituent experience. And we'll talk about that again in a sec. So when you put it all together, I think that everything we've described creates an electronic file folder. And all of these things together make government decision-making better. But it is very hard to do this if you don't have a centralized system that can hold this array and diversity of content, tasks, actions taken, history, notes, and all of those pieces. So the problem with the paper folder is it can only sit on one person's desk at one time. And you all have gotten over that because you bought OnBase and you know about simultaneous access. But so much of the problem of government and doing a good job is sitting up there in the tasks and the activities and what did somebody already address. So I think, even though the analysts weren't trying to help out government when they came up with it, case management is an important philosophy for us to embrace. So why is this important for government? And the first one is, I feel like Muhammad Ali when I say this. More with less must be addressed. More with less must be addressed. More with less must be addressed. The silos make us less effective. Okay? And you already know that. That's why you all bought something with a central repository. We have a problem with our deployment speed in government. I know. Go ahead and laugh. It's cool. They'll get it on the recording too, which is great. I went to the National Association of State CIOs conference a couple weeks ago in Baltimore, and I was expecting to hear a lot of conversations about bad budgets and all that, you know, everything that you hear every morning when you wake up in Michigan and other states. But mostly what they were talking about was that they have about 2.5 years to make a difference. When a governor's elected, appoints them as a CIO, they have about 2.5 years of effectiveness. That's not enough for anybody to get anything done. And their struggle was, I need projects to get up faster, and I need them to be showing their ROI faster. Because it isn't so much that I can't get money for things. It's that I have to show the ROI, and let's just say it is ECM that they want to embrace. I need something that helps me move that up to the top of the priority. Because you've got a million things you could do, many things you can't afford. Why pick ECM over those other things? So, I mean, this was a very interesting discussion, but it started with the idea that we have to be able to do projects that go up faster. And the advantage of OnBase is that it goes up faster. So that's important. The advantage of what I'm going to talk to and what comes next is it leverages your existing OnBase investment, which I think is nice. And I really believe, even though I don't ever trust analysts, that the case management model actually makes sense for government. And I think it makes sense for the government that we want to be, the one that takes good care of our constituents. So where would we use case management? Is anyone out there hearing from their bosses or perhaps themselves, they're talking about customer relationship management stuff? Is anybody sort of thinking about that? Okay. This is where really CRM is case management. And I'll show you some screens at the end that will help you kind of see that. But if your supervisors or your elected officials are saying, I want to take a customer relationship management approach to how we're dealing with folks who approach government and they need help, or they've got multiple transactions that they're taking on with government. The classic example being, let's just say I want to start a business in your town. How many departments do I have to go to if I'm going to build a new building and I need the business permits? And in the state of Maine, if you wanted to serve lobster, you had to get the lobster permit, the alcohol permit, and the restaurant permit. My department had a one-stop shop for licensing because it was so complicated. I mean, that's an example of where someone's going to come to government, they're going to interface with multiple departments, And wouldn't it be nice if we all sort of were on the same page with where they are in different processes? See, that's the advantage of case management, because it brings it all together, because it fosters the collaboration that you need to do a good job, or maybe at least not to repeat work that someone else in some other department in government is already doing. Or when your decision relies on someone else's decision before you should take your decision, wouldn't it be nice to know what that dialogue was? So if you're looking at CRM or you have that philosophy, I think that's important. There's a bunch of processes in government, and I've already alluded to one, that I think the case management approach makes sense. And project management being one, so let's take the classic example, you're building something. It's going to be a publicly owned asset. There's usually a planning process, there are public hearings, there are environmental reviews that have to be done, there may be other compliance tasks because maybe you're mixing grant money and your own money. These types of projects can be managed really well inside a case management philosophy. We have customers that are managing vendor and contracts through case management because they have a lot of interaction with the vendors, and that requires them to hold a lot of data. We have folks that are looking at things like permitting. Again, for the reasons I've said, you're going to interact with multiple departments. And you have linear processes that are going on. I have to fill out an application. I have to submit certain paperwork. Several people have to review and sign it off. Maybe I even have to go before a board and get a variance, or I have to actually get a formal vote on the issuance of a permit. All of that stuff. And in health and human services, I think it goes without saying that when you're bringing a set of programs together in a bundle of services to someone, that a case management approach makes sense. And they've been doing this for several years now. The problem for them in particular, and perhaps for the housing folks in the front of the room, is we haven't always had very good databases to handle all of this information. Or we buy the database and then we get a new initiative either from the state or from the federal level, and we have to add that in to the databases, and sometimes our vendor doesn't care, won't add in that data. We have to collect new data points for that to get that money, which we want to use in our communities, and we can't get the vendor to add that data, so we could create another system outside of that. And so the systems that we have multiply, and we started with this maybe nice OnBase system and some line of businesses, and the next thing you know, because we took this money, we have more and more disparate systems. So it's gotten crazy again, and then we all get upset and concerned about it, and we bring it back together. Case management, because you basically own the database development, you get to run your own database. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the places that I've seen a lot of work just recently in government is human resources and specifically training. And the specific example, which I hope we're going to do a peer-to-peer roundtable for our users group this summer, is the Las Vegas Police Department. Police officers have a lot of training that they have to do, and they have to be certified. They have to do a lot of those certifications annually or on a regular cycle, or they need to be taken off duty. And so they are using a combination of WorkView, which is what we're talking about here, and workflow to make sure that they don't miss any of those certifications that they need for people, particularly their officers in the field, but also their dispatchers and folks that have state requirements for certain types of training. So HR and training, I think, is one of those things where we might have a large system in place where we're doing timesheets and payroll and all that kind of thing, but who's taking care of required training in those niche departments where there are certifications and other things required from state or other funders that we have to deal with? So one of the problems that I had in particular in my department was we were an affordable housing agency, and I had a number of programs that I was running. We got like $90 million a year from HUD for project-based Section 8. We had another $30 million a year for our housing trust fund. We got another 25-ish million for our homeless programs. So I ended up with 6 different databases line of business, which is way less than all of you because you're operating across counties. But the problem was all 6 of those databases were written to take care of what HUD wanted, which didn't really have anything to do with what my director wanted in most cases. And I had some struggles with reporting. So we actually directly and illegally SQL queried all of those databases and created reporting outside of all those systems in gross violation of my software licensing with all of those vendors, and put those reports together because that was what my director wanted. And anytime my director wanted to connect and collect other data points, I had nothing because I wasn't in control of those databases in the development and the data points that were being collected. Sometimes we would get some interesting money. We got some extra money because of the fires. You may remember the Apache and Sitgrave fires that happened when I was there. Or in Maine, we got extra HUD money because of an ice storm. And there wasn't anywhere to put that in the existing databases that I had. And then we had some other smaller things like HR, where we weren't in control of that system because there was a countywide system or a statewide system, but I still had this data I had to collect, like certifications and training. So one of the reasons I was looking at WorkView all those years ago was I had all these little database needs. And I had already spent $50,000 a pop for these other 6 databases and had no other money. So if I could have leveraged my OnBase, bought some seat licenses and the WorkView server at that time, for the cost of one of those databases, I could have stood up the database platform to develop these small database pieces that I need to get the reporting that I need and to do those kinds of things. So I think the advantage that you get from OnBase, as you see up there, one, you get a seat license and a concurrent. You stand up a WorkView server, and now those little pockets of database needs that aren't really big enough to justify going to the market and buying another product are now available to you through OnBase, which is a system you know and love. And by the way, has security and transactions and audit capabilities because it's OnBase in the background. So when I thought about coming here to talk about case management, one of the things that I thought was really important to discuss for government is that we have a number of people that are managing very important pieces of data on Excel spreadsheets. My folks created databases anytime there was extra data in Access, and one time I found 3 versions of the same data out on my network in Access databases because the people were trying to help. They would just slam up this Access database for everybody, but it didn't have security. You couldn't use it simultaneously, and the next thing you know, you'd have redundant copies with different data in each one. So people will find a way to keep track of this data, as we always have in government, but it's not really the best way, and it's not leveraging things, and it's not necessarily helping you with the silo and the collaboration piece. So where does that bring us? Well, I think OnBase can help you, because the WorkView product that we had a few years ago was certainly good, but it's much better coming in OnBase 12. In fact, it's actually called Case Management. It really lets you get over the Post-it notes and spreadsheets theory of collaboration and how do I collect the data. And importantly, it's going to bring together your documents, your data, and your workflow. So what I wanted to do was show you some screenshots. This is a new thing that's coming out in 12, which, as you heard from AJ this morning, comes out this summer, hopefully this month. They're all typing frantically back at Highland. So one of the first things that I think about case management that's important, that I thought was important all those years ago when I saw it, that I think is important about workflow, is it brings together tasks in one screen that's really task-centric. And by that I mean, if you browse out to a file share and there's a set of documents, you look at those documents, it doesn't tell you what you need to do today. One of the reasons why the dashboards have gotten so important and pop up again and again, and the analytics are important, is because we have a huge mound of work to do in government. We all know that. What do I have to do today? What do I need to get done today? And you'll see that discussion anywhere from what bills do I have to pay, because if I pay them today, I still get the 10% discount for early payment, all the way to a story I heard a few months ago from Clark County, Nevada, where they used dashboards to figure out which children had been in the foster care system for over a certain number of days, and they really focused their efforts on those children who needed a permanent home. And simply by presenting the data better, they placed 500 people, 500 children more in a year than they had the year before, simply by better understanding the data that they were already collecting. So when we look at task-centric views, I think the reason that it's critical for government right now is we don't have enough time to sit around to try to figure out what it is we have to do. We need the technology to help me focus. So that's one piece of it. And then as you look at the next one, what I think is really important is the ease of making the change. The problem with the data systems that we buy is we don't own them. Now, there's good and bad to that. There's good and bad to that. It's great to have an expert on security and to do all those things. The nice thing about WorkView and the coming case management bundle is that things like these filters can be created in seconds. And they are still managed by the same security that you know and love about OnBase. So what that means is, for the same reason that some folks are embracing SharePoint, for the same reasons that we heard Phil say less with less, you have the ability to create filters that let you drill down to what you need to drill down to get your work done. I think that's important because I don't think we suffer anymore from not knowing the data. I think we can't find it in all of the data. And we need to focus because our inboxes are usually the way we know what we have to do. And that's, well, in my case, there'll be 400 emails at the end of today. So that's a lot to dig through. All right. One of the things that's really gotten a lot better with our software over the years is this ability to do sorts. This particular screenshot is from an insurance solution, and these folks are really all about the due dates. So what this is showing you is that you can drag due date, which is this column over here, up to here and sort. And again, I think what this is doing is it's empowering people to look at what's in front of them in different ways. Normally, you don't have that kind of flexibility out of the data solutions that you're buying. And this is what I like about this. So when you saw us moving to the Unity client and you saw that new look and feel, one of the things that came with that is the ability to sort by column in custom queries. And so we're just continuing to build on some of the things we figured out with the Unity client. But again, this really helps people manage their own work, and they can do it themselves. No IT support to get a different way to look at it. Some of the things that I like about the Unity client and what we're doing in the particular case management piece is putting things together on the screen. One of the reasons that the Unity client has gotten certainly good reviews for its look and feel is that, first of all, it's starting to look like Microsoft Office. Are you guys sort of on the Office that has the ribbon? Yeah, that makes users feel better. You know, when they're going between programs and they're seeing familiarity in the ribbon look for finding commands. That's really important because if you're trying to expand to other departments and you're trying to build some credibility, it's nice if they don't have to hunt and poke. And frankly, in the older versions of OnBase, you have to hunt a bit to find things. There's a lot of stuff on the right click, and that's very nice. But you'll see task-oriented pieces here. You'll see the document view here. But at the top, there's a classic example of the convergence of data and documents, which was the title of this conversation. So what you are able to do is to create views that embed the document viewer, and you know it's that because there's your zooming and all those pieces, as well as your data sitting there at the top. And I had a lot of experience teaching people programs when I was in government, and I would know instantly when I'd done the wrong thing or picked the wrong program because they would look at it and they'd squinch their face up. And I just knew that the interface wasn't working for them. But I think this interface can work for them, and if it doesn't, you can change it. See, and that's something we don't get very often in our data systems. Similarly, you can do some file marking and color coding to give more visual indicators to people to help them focus on certain things. Like in this particular case, they've got open and closed. Oh my God, it's been sent to legal. I would have needed that one. And there's some other things you can do using WorkView to really help you draw people's attention to what's going on. This is actually embedding a couple of other data objects here. And you'll notice that the tabbing across the top also lets you go from the case to the diary, which is a date-related view of what's going on, the tasks, which you're going to see in a second, and some worksheets that they're using to work things out. So your ability to bring things together on one screen is what I think is the most powerful piece of case management. And I've had customers in the past that would say to me, well, can't you just keep all this data in OnBase? And they would create like, 85 keywords because the data, they would try to put the data in the keywords. This is a better way to handle the data, and you still get to use OnBase for it. Now, in this coming version, one of the other things you're going to get is the ability to embed the folder view. I think this is important. I thought folders were one of the smartest things that we ever developed at OnBase because, moving government to a paperless world really, to me, made a lot of sense if I can make a virtual folder. But now that we've got you all used to the virtual folder, it makes sense that you can also embed that in your case management. So you've still got your data sitting up at the top, which is the basic data about this person that you might want to have to hand. You've still got your folder tree now. And importantly, you've got, remember what you can do with folders and folder templates. It can tell you everything that's missing in that folder. So if you are using the paper checklist right now to see what's in the folder, and you've got foldering set up and you're not using folder templates, you're missing a really great feature of folders that can give people a quick visual that says, wow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm missing 7 documents that I think this perfect complete folder should have. So what I like about this screen is, okay, I've got my data, which I control, and I'm obviously into control. I've got a great embedded document viewer. I'm still using my foldering, which I've set up, and I'm even able to embed the related required documents stuff showing up there. I think the power of having this all on one screen is the kind of thing that makes people happy that you give them a new data system. So I think that's really important. Up at the top, and remember back to our original slide on the structure of case management, the tasks that you do are such an important part about this sort of philosophy of case management, because we wouldn't be having this conversation if it was just about the documents. Usually in government, we have a process. And we don't just have a process, we have a required process. And we don't just have a required process, we need evidence that we did the required process. So it's nice to know that if you take the approach of using something like WorkView and case management, that you can still embed workflows that you might already have developed, or you can do what this session is truly about, which is the convergence of data, document, and your processes. Because in government in particular, I think that your ROI from an OnBase investment really happens when you use the workflow as well. So what you're seeing up there is a task tab, and those 5 tasks are just like the ad hoc tasks that you're used to seeing in the workflow window. They're still dictated by the security that you've set up around those tasks. So someone's not going to see an ad hoc task that they don't have the ability or shouldn't have the ability to execute. But you also have the ability to customize that to some extent based on what this data view is. So if I'm acting on this data and I have a set of tasks that it makes sense that I have access to easily on that screen, that's what shows up there. One of the other things that I think may be useful to you, it kind of goes both ways. So in my life, in my housing days, I used to set up all of these timers in Outlook. Make sure you get your environmental review from, Tucson. Make sure you review this. Make sure you review that. Do all this stuff. So I'm entering those at the same time that I'm probably entering a date in a date field in a database, because those databases didn't really care about me laying out my work that I needed to do on that day. They were more about collecting the data points to transmit them back to my funder, which was HUD. So one of the things that's now popping up in those case management use structures was that square called Diaries. Well, here it is sitting here, all open Diaries. Now, the thing that I think is interesting about this is you're going to be able to create your tasks, and you have the ability to see what's been done, what's past due, everything that's open. And if you think about this from a customer service thing, let's take the IT help desk or the backlog that Phil was talking about this morning. We have folks in Naperville who are using WorkView to keep track of all their IT tickets. That's a classic example of a small database, or maybe not so small. But in my case, I looked at solutions, and they were between $6,000 and $10,000 to keep track of the tickets of what people needed help for, and to assign due dates and do all that kind of thing. Well, this is an example of keeping track of those types of appointments inside of a data point. So if you would imagine that top object would be a ticket someone opened when they need help or they have a project idea. And I was able to also look and see all the things I'd promised, some portion of the 900 that Phil had, might be sitting here. And to see, these are the ones that I need to focus on because they're past due. They're past the time that I promised them. And these are the things that are still open in general that aren't past due. I mean, I think that has power if you're creating the kind of database where you're collecting tasks from many locations and you need people to focus on specific tasks to get them done. I think that has the most value when you're dealing with other departments, or I think the IT ticket service desk is a very good example of that. So what that turns out to be as well is they've now built in some simple calendar type views so that you can look at the work that's within the tasks and processes that this particular WorkView database case management piece will be looking at. And you can kind of see them on a calendar and really see what you've got due whenever, and then double click this and open it to see what it is. So let's kind of bring it all together. Everybody's kind of comfortable-ish with case management as a definition. Questions on that? You kind of see all the pieces and parts kind of floating out there, and I'm imagining that right now you know how many different systems people are using to keep track of all those things. And does everyone sort of see how WorkView brings them together and embeds them into screens? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay. I think that case management can make government better. I especially think that's the case where the pieces of a process or a particular department has a lot of effect on what another department is doing. So that customer who comes to you and needs help from multiple departments to get a project done, the person who comes to you and applies for health and human services, or maybe housing, the business that comes to you and needs licensing, and they need the information that there's a new business needs to be sent to the tax assessor, and you need to have an inspection set up because it's going to serve food. Those kinds of processes that span multiple departments are very good examples of reasons to use case management, because government slows down when we jump departments. It seems to be nothing we can do about it. And people get really upset when they have to tell the same story to 4 different people in government again and again. So if we had this moment where we brought together documents and workflow and data, I think we would be more efficient, because we could all go to the same place to look at what happened with that person. And that's the same reason why you bought OnBase in the first place. You wanted to all go to the same place to get the documents. I think that because you've already made an investment in OnBase, or you're going to make an investment in OnBase, that what this offers you is very affordable application development, because you're leveraging things you've already bought. And the things you buy to create the screens that I've been showing you are pieces that you could leverage as well for other things. And because you stand up a WorkView server and then you buy WorkView seat licenses to access it, those can be concurrent seat licenses. So the thought that you would have a database development platform that can bring together all the functionality of OnBase that you like, and that you could use that again and again and again across all these departments we've been talking about for different databases is really the value. Because in my life, when I looked at, let's say, an IT ticket and work order kind of solution, it was between $6,000 and $10,000. I bought a small housing choice voucher program. That cost me $15,000. I had nothing for HR. I don't know what it would have cost me to keep track of training and certifications, but I had some of that. And I was already paying some seat charge for access and having people stand up databases that didn't have security, that didn't support simultaneous access, that weren't connected to the documents, or maybe the workflows I've already built. So there is a cost to the software, but when you remember the concurrent and the fact that you can use it again and again to stand up these kinds of case management pieces for departments that may be smaller but still have a need, when you aggregate that, I think it's a very good value for government. So remember the concurrent. It's the same thing I say about workflow. Remember the concurrent. So I think we have a couple minutes for questions. Any questions? Yes?
I'm not an OnBase customer. I'm here as sort of hand-holding someone who's going to be an OnBase customer. So you're throwing out around a lot of terms I don't know. So is WorkView, is that like a component of OnBase that we would license separately? Or
yes.
There,
Yep.
And are there so many cases that it wouldn't be time practical to sort of
No, and yes. And I'll tell you why. Because OnBase 12 is coming out, they're working on the pricing right now. So we have a lot of internal discussions about what will be bundled together for case management. So you buy OnBase and you get the database, all right? So normally this is where all your documents are sitting, right? And then you buy client licenses. So these are the concurrents. Some people have the web server for web-based stuff and to manage that security. So that's another piece. So, and then you've got some version of scanning probably. You might have some other intake type stuff like dip and cold depending on what you start with. So this is to get it in, right? And this is to access it. So that's your basic what we call scan, store, and retrieve stuff.
Are those all different modules that can be purchased?
They are. But let's pretend that you decided to automate because you heard what I said. You called my mother. She said, yes, if Terry says buy workflow, buy workflow. So there's your automation tool. And you have seat licenses for people to access that. And then if you want to do what we're talking about here, you buy WorkView or what it's going to be called, which is there's going to be a bundle called Case Management. And you could buy that. And that's going to get you the platform to do the database development. And then you're going to buy concurrent seats to access that. So the theory about this is that you add the pieces as you need them, as you blow out your solution. So for what you just saw there, you saw workflow, you saw WorkView, you saw Unity, and that's going to end up getting bundled in for use with the case management, I think, and this basic core of OnBase. So that's what you saw sitting in there. And you can talk with Scott and his folks, and they can spec it all out as you talk through exactly which departments you want to cover and which features and functionalities you want to get. So you would definitely buy it in modules. And if I had my druthers, you would buy this stuff. You'd buy one workflow seat license, if for no other reason, to do timers and notifications to everybody. So like they never necessarily go into a workflow, but they at least get an email that says, Terry, it's time to do this or else, right? And then over time, you're going to buy more and more workflow licenses, and then you're going to get yourself over to here, depending on whether you're looking at database solutions that are when you add them up, they're going to nickel and dime you across, the whole of your county or your city or whatever. So that's what I think is kind of like an expansion path. And then there's a bunch of integrations. If you've got Esri, or you're using CityWorks or Acela for asset management, or you've got court case management or a bunch of things, there's another integration module called Application Enabler. And to date, we've done more than 500 integrations with Application Enabler. So, and Scott knows all about that, and he can tell you. So, even though you have this core of documents, you've got all those other, what we call line of business applications, and the thing that takes care of that for you is App Enabler. And you buy that, there's different models. If you buy the enterprise, you can use it again and again to connect to whatever line of business applications. And that sits between you and all these documents. It connects those databases, court case management, health and human services, land records, all that kind of stuff, and allows people to retrieve documents from inside of there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's a fast one, sorry.
That's good.
Yes?
Is case management only compatible with 12 forward, or can it go back to, we're on release 8?
No. Bad news about that. I'm pretty sure you're going to have to bring yourself up to 12 to get it. Okay? And you want to do that because there's more functionality, but I admit that that's a path that you're going to have to work on. It may take you a little bit, but at least you've got something. Because if you start to look at all those smaller databases, or you've got a problem with important data being in spreadsheets, then maybe it seems more important to get to that moment.
Is that something that, I have a little bit different role than everybody else in administration, so I can see me needing a bunch of the case management stuff, but not necessarily everybody else. Is that something that you'd even want to go down the path for one person? Or is this something you really need to do?
I'm going to cheat and answer this. I don't think it's about how many people. I think it's about the importance of the data they're collecting, one, and whether you also need other functionalities like workflow and access to documents. Because you're probably not going to buy a database for one person. But how important is that data? Do you need some faster tools to create reporting out of that data?
Terry, can I just add one?
Sure.
So, OnBase is supporting out the last few versions a concept of doing incremental updates.
Yeah.
So what that means is we can upgrade the main database to 12, and you can leave your existing workflow users on 8.
Yeah.
We can do that right now. And then we can actually put another application server out there and have new users connecting to Case Manager using all of 12's features, but we don't have to go back and do anything with the 8 users. We can leave them set. Now they're getting kind of old, long in the tooth, and they're going to go out of support here if they're not already. So you probably want to get them up to 10 at least sometime soon. But OnBase lets you kind of do these phased upgrades.
Which was a very long general session with Miguel, so thank you for reminding me about that. But yes, that's always there. I still think it's about the data and the importance of the job. There's a lady in the basement of the Maine state capitol. Her name was Gladys, and all contracts had to go through her. One woman, all contracts, hundreds of millions of dollars. That's always my example of really important data. She never lost anything, by the way. She finally retired from state government a couple years ago. Other questions? Thanks for your time.